C. Boyden Gray, Disability Rights Leadership Series, 1999-2000. A project of Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, DREDF, with Access Video, University of San Francisco.
The ADA is in the sense of empowerment, a very Republican idea.
How does the ADA rate in your life's accomplishments?
Oh gosh, it's one of the 2 or 3 things that I'll be most proud of when I look back on my life. And of course, one of the great experiences working with Pat Wright and the disability community, and with Evan Kemp and Justin Dart. It was a wonderful period in my life, and to find that President Bush had such insights into this, I think in part because his son Neil was dyslexic and told, or parents were told he could never finish college, and they managed to get around that, and he actually ended up with an advanced degree in 5 years. Maybe it's because of his daughter, the one he lost to leukemia, I don't know, but he had an extraordinary insight, and I learned a lot from him as well. This was a great period, and one that I will treasure. There was a receptivity, clearly, in the Reagan and Bush administrations, from the very top, from President Reagan, then Vice President, later President Bush. There was a tremendous receptivity. What was needed was someone to connect, if you will, the Pat Wrights of the world with the policymakers. Don't underestimate the serendipity, if you will, of having Dick Thornburgh and Ginny involved too. She was one of the great advocates for the disabled, again because of the tragedy that he had suffered, that the Attorney General Thornburgh had suffered. But all these things conspired, if you will, to produce the result, which was magnificent. I suppose my role was simply to alert people to it, say, look, force people to pay attention, because once you got their attention, it wasn't all that difficult. It wasn't all that difficult. The disability movement is all about empowerment, and that is not something that Republicans, for example, were going to be opposed to. As far as the Democrats concerned, you say civil rights and you have an adherent to begin with. So, but the convergence of those two in this legislation and in this movement was something which, looking back on it, seems easy. At the time, I suppose it was quite difficult. We were up against lots of obstacles, but and the attitude about the disabled was almost ugly, bordering on the ugly. The way people viewed the disabled and not wanting to have anything to do with them, and there were occasional jokes in the White House when we first got started on this, and quite ugly. That was why we needed the act, was to change the attitudes foremost. One had to stare down the people who would make fun of the effort, and then later to stare down the conservatives who would criticize it from a programmatic point of view, not an attitudinal thing, but programmatically. I don't know that Lee Atwater, who was the political guru of the Reagan-Bush years until he became himself disabled, I don't know whether he ever laughed at me in front of me, but he certainly was a true believer in the importance of all this by the time the '88 election was over, and it was persuading people like Atwater in the end, the politicians who control the way elections are debated. That was really the ultimate triumph here, was getting the politicians, the political advisors, the consultants to understand why this was important, and Lee completely accepted it, and maybe I had something to do with that. How did I convince him? I suppose by saying there were votes there, which is what a consultant wants to hear, but what a political advisor wants to hear. But Lee was I think an underestimated person. He used to take popular book jackets and put them around philosophy texts that he would be reading. He didn't want anybody to know he was reading philosophy. He wanted people to think he was reading some bestseller. Lee was a complicated character and a profound thinker, and I was able to appeal to his not better nature, just his more profound nature, and he didn't have much trouble getting there. He just needed someone to explain it to him, and he was there. And this is a big point. Atwater Atwater understood what we were doing and was supportive. Had he been opposed, it never would have happened. The promise wouldn't have been made during the campaign, the ventilation of the issue wouldn't have happened during the campaign, and the ADA wouldn't have happened. What was tragic was his own illness, which meant that when the '92 campaign came around, he wasn't there to say, okay, let's trumpet this triumph. Let's trumpet this accomplishment. What the politicians did at that point, not having Atwater's, the political advisors not having Atwater's, insight, what they said is, oh my God, this implementation of the statute is still causing ruffling feathers in the business community, and therefore we've got to back off and sort of criticize our own handiwork. And I think Bill Kristol, for example, a very wise conservative, understood how silly this was and kept arguing, that's ridiculous. We've taken our lumps with the business community long ago. They got nowhere else to go. What we ought to do is trumpet this and take advantage of it and welcome the disability movement into the Republican Party and not complain about it. But that was lost because Atwater was gone. And that was a real tragedy. I don't think it impacted the election that much. I think that wouldn't have made the difference. But it was a regrettable mistake, and maybe it would have made a difference. I don't know. We from everything I've been able to understand, we picked up, and this is a political comment, but politics is politics, and politics is what got the ADA passed and acted. We picked up a lot of the disability vote that normally would have been expected to go to the Democrats in 1988. And Evan used to say it was the margin of difference. Well, there are always lots of things that are the margin of difference, but it was a big, big swing. And Atwater understood it. I'm now repeating, Atwater understood exactly what had happened. Most of those votes we lost, and that wouldn't have made up the gap probably in 1992. But most of those votes we lost. And I think if Atwater had been alive, Bush would have been reelected. For all that I did, I couldn't have done it if I didn't have a boss who was ahead of me in terms of his own life experiences. I think that the greatest success has come with people who were forced, and some of them did it without being forced, although still under the umbrella of the statute. The people who deal directly with disabled have been the biggest beneficiaries. It's those who didn't have obvious cause to understand the benefits that have been the lags. But and that's why I say the employment thing, to be an employer of the disabled as opposed to a servicer of the disabled in the sense of transportation or selling things at retail. I think the employers have been slow to take advantage of this. I wonder about the high-tech industry, whether they fully appreciate what this means, what they've done means for the disability community. And that I don't know what the disability community has done to talk to AOL or Microsoft or the other internet the service providers to see what they might be able to do to enhance the employment by allowing people to work from home or whatever, and bypass the accommodation issue altogether. This is something which I just haven't stayed on top of, and I don't know what's happening. And I hope that people are pursuing that with as much vigor as they can, because this new internet world is one that's made for people with all kinds of disabilities.
Disability Rights Leadership Series, 1999-2000. Producer, Phyllis Ward, Access Video. Interviewers, Phyllis Ward and Mary Lou Breslin. Post-production, editing, captions, audio description, Dave Newell. Stewardship, promotion, distribution. Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund. Mary Lou Breslin, Susan Henderson. Special thanks goes to both the sung and the unsung heroes who work tirelessly to make the Americans with Disabilities Act a reality. The Disability Rights Leadership Series owes a debt of gratitude to the individuals who agreed to be interviewed and without whose passion and dedication the ADA would not have become law. The series would not have come about without the vision of Pat Wright, longtime Director of Governmental Affairs for DREDF, and Arlene Mayerson, DREDF's directing attorney, who conceptualized the series and the interview themes. Thanks goes to the University of San Francisco for sponsoring the project that included the Disability Rights Leadership Series, and the Bancroft Library, University of California, Berkeley, for accepting an archival copy of the unedited interviews and providing a safe and permanent home for the collection. The series would not have been possible without funding from the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. A list of the interviewees and links to their interviews can be found at jedf.org. 2015.